The crystalline structures shimmered across the surface of Cygnus 7, spreading in silent geometric patterns that methodically consumed everything in their path. From the observation deck of the Galactic Union's diplomatic vessel, Ambassador Trell of the Varaxian Confederation watched in horror as the agricultural world below was slowly transformed. Fields of golden grain that once fed billions across 3 sectors now glittered with an unnatural blue luminescence as the Kale assimilation wave continued its relentless advance. How long until complete planetary assimilation? Trell asked, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme distress among his kind. Senior Science Officer Malira consulted her data pad, her scaled fingers trembling slightly. Approximately 42 standard hours, Ambassador. The Kale have already converted 70% of the surface biomass into their crystalline structures. Ambassador Trell turned to face the representatives from 17 member species who had gathered in the observation lounge. Their faces, whether mammalian, reptilian, gaseous, or mechanical, all displayed the universal expression of fear. The Union Council remains deadlocked, Trell announced, his voice heavy with defeat. They continue to debate economic sanctions while this world dies before our eyes. The evacuation fleet can save perhaps 30% of the population, but the rest. His voice trailed off. A desperate transmission crackled through the ship's communication system, projected automatically into the observation deck. This is Colonial Governor Alera at Cygnus Station Alpha. The crystals have reached the outer districts. They're not destroying, they're converting. People touched by the wave aren't dying. They're being absorbed. Their biomass is being restructured at the molecular level. The Kale aren't invaders. They're a conversion process. For the love of all that's sacred, help US. The transmission abruptly ended with a sound like shattering glass. Senior Communications Officer Valzan, a Thraxian with translucent skin that revealed his multiple pulsating hearts, turned away from his console. That was the last active broadcast from his surface, Ambassador. Cygnus Station Alpha has gone silent. In the stunned silence that followed, Science Officer Malira suddenly stiffened, her eyes widening as she stared at her scanner. Ambassador, something just appeared near the primary Kale assimilation vector. A ship of unknown configuration. On the main view screen, a vessel appeared that looked nothing like the sleek, organic designs favored by Union architects. It was angular, scarred, almost primitive in appearance, a dark gray wedge bristling with what appeared to be weapon emplacements and communications arrays. Its hull bore the scars of numerous battles, patched and repaired countless times. Identity? Demanded Trell, wondering if some previously unknown species had arrived to assist or to take advantage of the chaos. Valzen's hands danced across his console. Nothing in standard Union registries. The ship is broadcasting no recognition codes, no diplomatic clearances. But, wait. He paused, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with surprise. The Artificial Intelligence Archives are retrieving something from the restricted historical military records. The view screen flickered, and ancient text appeared alongside the mysterious vessel. Classification: Terran Federation Warship. Vessel class: Avenger-class destroyer. Status: species presumed extinct or self-isolated. See restricted file, Terran withdrawal protocols. Threat level: extreme. Warning: Terran military doctrine classified as inherently unstable and aggressive. Ambassador Trell felt a chill travel from his primary spine to his auxiliary neural cluster. Humans, he whispered. That's impossible. They disappeared centuries ago after refusing the Union's weapons limitations treaties. The prevailing theory was self-annihilation during their internal wars. The collected representatives broke into frightened murmurs, each accessing their cultural memory archives for information about the legendary species that had been more myth than reality for generations. On the planet below, the Kale collective consciousness registered the intrusion. The crystalline structures momentarily paused their expansion, redirecting energy to analyze this unexpected variable. The Kale had encountered thousands of species during their methodical expansion across the galaxy. Some fled, some fought futilely, all were eventually assimilated. This new entity required assessment. Without warning or communication, the human vessel opened fire. There was no energy beam, no plasma discharge, nothing like the weapons the Union races had developed and then largely abandoned in favor of diplomatic solutions. Instead, what appeared to be solid metal projectiles erupted from the ship's forward section, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. These projectiles tore through the space where the Kale's energy field should have provided protection and slammed directly into the primary crystalline structure, directing the assimilation wave. The impact was catastrophic. Massive chunks of the central Kale formation shattered, sending crystalline debris in all directions. For the first time in recorded history, a Kale assimilation process faltered, the beautiful and terrible geometric spread across the planet's surface temporarily halting. By the cosmic void, breathed Science Officer Malira. They're using primitive kinetic weapons, physical projectiles. The Kale's energy fields are calibrated to disperse energy weapons, not solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. On the view screen, they could see the damaged Kale structure responding. Smaller crystalline formations broke away from the main mass, reconfiguring into attack configurations, propelling themselves toward the human vessel with increasing velocity. Inside the Avengers Command Center, Captain Kaido Tanaka stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with dark, unblinking eyes. His weathered face showed no emotion as the crystalline entities approached his ship. Magnetic accelerator cannons depleted, recharging cycle at 30%, reported Tactical Officer Anya Sharma, her voice as measured and calm as if she were reading a weather report. Kale response formations closing, estimated contact in 47 seconds. Captain Tanaka nodded once. Deploy countermeasures. Evasive pattern Delta 6. Prepare point defense systems. The bridge crew, 12 humans in total, each position staffed by a single officer rather than the multiple specialists typical on Union vessels, moved with practiced efficiency. There were no excess movements, no unnecessary communication. Each knew their role in what was clearly a well-rehearsed combat scenario. The Avenger suddenly accelerated at a rate that should have crushed its crew, executing a series of maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics as understood by Union scientists. Smaller weapon systems activated along its hull, firing precisely calculated bursts at the approaching Kale formations. Where the shots connected, crystalline structures shattered. "They're moving like predators," whispered one of the Union representatives watching from the observation deck. Like they were built for war. As the Avenger executed its dance of destruction, it broadcast a single message, unencrypted, on all frequencies, repeating in a continuous loop. It wasn't words or data packets, as the Union species expected. Instead, it was a sound, a primal, thunderous roar, a battle cry that resonated at a frequency that triggered instinctive fear responses in most sentient species. It was the sound of rage given form, of challenge issued in the most primordial language of all, violence. The Union representatives watched in horrified silence as they realized the truth. Humans hadn't gone extinct. They had withdrawn, removed themselves from a galactic community they viewed as weak and ineffectual. And they had apparently spent the intervening centuries perfecting the art of warfare. Urgent requests for communication flooded from every diplomatic vessel in orbit. But the Avenger ignored them all, focused entirely on its brutal engagement with the Kale. The crystalline entities were adapting now, forming specialized hunter-killer configurations that utilized what appeared to be energy-based cutting beams. Several scored direct hits on the Avenger's hull, leaving glowing gashes in the armor plating. The human ship continued its erratic evasion pattern, but it was clearly taking damage. "They can't possibly survive," Ambassador Trell said quietly. "One ship against a Kale assimilation force? Even with their impressive technology, they'll be overwhelmed." As if to prove him wrong, The Avenger suddenly executed a maneuver that placed it directly above the wounded primary Kale structure. Its MAC cannons, apparently recharged, fired again, sending 3 massive projectiles directly into the damaged crystalline formation. The impact was catastrophic, shattering the central control structure. The effect on the planetary assimilation was immediate and stunning. The geometric spread across Cygnus 7 didn't just pause. It began to retract, the crystalline structures losing cohesion, beginning to crumble at their furthest extension points. The Kale hunter-killer formations, seemingly enraged by this unprecedented setback, swarmed toward the Avenger in greater numbers. The human vessel, sustaining increasingly serious damage, suddenly engaged what appeared to be some form of faster-than-light drive. It didn't use the established jump points or navigation beacons that made Union FTL travel safe and predictable. It simply tore a hole in reality itself and vanished, leaving behind a temporarily crippled Kale presence and a galactic Union. Frozen in shock, in the secure communications room of the Avenger, Captain Tanaka removed his neural interface helmet, his stoic expression finally giving way to a grimace of pain as the combat stimulants began to wear off. Blood trickled from his nose, a side effect of the enhanced reaction time injections. "Status report," he demanded, pressing a medical patch to his bleeding nostril. Tactical Officer Sharma, similarly removing her neural interface, glanced at the data scrolling across her screen. Hull integrity at 72%. 2 crew with minor injuries. Max system functional, but Barrel 3 will require replacement within 50 operational hours. FTL drive stable after emergency jump. We're approximately 3.2 light-years from the engagement zone, hidden within the Barnard's Comet Cluster. And the Kale confirmed critical damage to their primary assimilation structure. Conservative estimate suggests we've set back their planetary conversion process by at least 72 hours. Enough time for any remaining colonists to evacuate if the Union actually decides to act. Captain Tanaka nodded, then turned to Communications Officer Lee, who was already preparing the quantum entanglement transmitter, technology far beyond anything the Union possessed, allowing instantaneous communication without detectable signals. "Prepare full engagement report for Aegis Command," Tanaka ordered. "Include all sensor data on Kale composition, response patterns, and adaptability metrics. Tactical assessment to follow after full crew debriefing." "Yes, Captain," Lee responded, fingers dancing across his console. "Should I include analysis of Union response?" Tanaka's expression darkened slightly. "Yes. Note their complete tactical inaction and continued reliance on ineffective diplomatic protocols despite clear evidence of Kale intent. Mark it as further confirmation of assessment pattern alpha." As the Avenger's crew tended to their wounds in their ship, a very different conversation was taking place in a location that appeared on no Union star charts. Deep within an artificial planetary system hidden inside the Carina Nebula, the massive installation known as Bastion Prime hummed with activity. Within its central command hub, Fleet Admiral Helena Vega reviewed the Avenger's transmission with growing concern. "Replay the Kale response sequence again," she ordered, and the holographic display showed the crystalline entities reforming after the initial MAC impacts. "This confirms our worst fears," said Dr. Julian Reeves, chief xenobiologist of the Bastion Defense Force. "The Kale aren't simply an aggressive species. They're a silicon-based collective entity with distributed intelligence. Each crystalline structure carries the full pattern of the whole. They don't invade planets. They convert them, repurposing all matter into extensions of themselves." Admiral Vega nodded grimly. "And their adaptation rate?" "Concerning," replied Tactical Director Omar Washington. "Based on the Avengers' sensor readings, they began developing countermeasures to kinetic weapons within minutes of first contact. Their learning curve is exponential." Admiral Vega turned to the figure standing silently in the shadows at the edge of the command center. An elderly man with piercing blue eyes and numerous cybernetic enhancements visible along his temples and throat. "Your assessment, Director Harmon? Marcus Harmon, director of Long Watch Intelligence and one of the few humans alive who remembered Earth before the withdrawal, stepped forward. The KO represent an existential threat beyond our modeling parameters. They are not conquerors or predators in the conventional sense. They are transformers. Their goal appears to be the systematic conversion of all matter in the galaxy to their crystalline form. He gestured to the holographic display showing the partially assimilated agricultural world. This isn't resource competition or territorial expansion. It's an ontological imperative. The KL do not perceive other life forms as alive in any meaningful sense, merely as raw material awaiting proper restructuring. And the Union's response? Asked Admiral Vega. Harmon's expression showed rare contempt. Exactly as predicted. Debate, equivocation, minimal evacuation efforts, no substantive military response. They've grown even softer than when we left them. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Every human present knew the history. How centuries ago, when the aggressive, techno-organic species known as the Technivores had begun consuming human colony worlds, the Galactic Union had refused military assistance, citing humanity's disproportionate defensive doctrines and inherently aggressive tendencies. Faced with extinction and abandoned by the galactic community, humanity had made a fateful decision. Rather than submit to the Union's weapons limitations treaties and ineffectual protection, they would withdraw entirely. They removed their planets and colonies from star charts, destroyed navigation beacons, and retreated to the uncharted regions of the galaxy to rebuild on their own terms. For generations, they had lived in their hidden bastions, developing technologies and military doctrines without the constraints of Union regulations. They had created the Long Watch, a network of stealth vessels that monitored galactic affairs from the shadows, gathering intelligence but never interfering. Until now, the KL must have been assimilating worlds for decades, said Tactical Director Washington. Why haven't we detected them before? They've been operating in the sectors furthest from our bastions, Director Harmon explained. And their method of conquest is insidious. No massive fleet movements, no obvious invasions. Just silent, methodical conversion. By the time a planet recognizes what's happening, it's too late for resistance. Admiral Vega squared her shoulders, decision made. We need to bring this to the full Defense Council. Based on the Avengers data, I'm designating the Kale as an Omega-level threat. This goes beyond our monitoring protocols. You're suggesting intervention? Asked Dr. Reeves. After 2 centuries of isolation, I'm suggesting survival, Vega replied firmly. If the Kale continue unchecked, it's only a matter of time before they discover one of our bastions. And unlike the Union, we have no illusions about diplomacy with an entity that views all other life as simply materials to be repurposed. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Kale collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented. Failure. The damaged primary structure on Cygnus 7 was slowly regenerating, but the assimilation process had been set back significantly. More concerning was the nature of the attack. The Kale operated through perfect logical efficiency. Every species they had encountered followed predictable patterns: fear, flight, ineffectual resistance, eventual submission. Resources were cataloged, processed, and optimally restructured. It was mathematics given purpose, the inevitable march of superior organization over chaotic biological systems. But this new entity, these humans, had behaved with what the Kale could only classify as a logical aggression. A single vessel had attacked a superior force without provocation, inflicted disproportionate damage through unexpected means, and then departed without attempting to claim territory or resources. The attack sequence contained no recognizable optimization pattern. Most troubling of all, the weapon systems employed were primitively effective. Physical projectiles accelerated to high velocities, technology that most advanced civilizations abandoned millennia ago in favor of energy-based systems. Yet against the Kale's defenses, these ancient weapons had proven catastrophically effective. The collective redirected significant processing capacity to analyze this anomaly. New priorities were established. 1. Accelerate assimilation processes across all active conversion zones to increase available computational mass. 2. Develop defensive countermeasures against kinetic weapon systems. 3. Deploy specialized seeker shards to track the energy signature of the human vessel to its point of origin. 4. Designate human entities as primary threat category. Convert on detection. As the Kale adjusted their galaxy-wide strategy, the Galactic Union erupted into panic. Emergency council sessions were called. Defense appropriations that had languished for decades were suddenly fast-tracked. Intelligence agencies scrambled to uncover any information about humanity's current status and capabilities. And in the diplomatic corps, a radical proposal gained traction. Find the humans, the species they had once dismissed as too aggressive and dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology, and beg for their help. 17 Union exploration vessels were hastily dispatched to the region where the Avenger had disappeared, carrying the highest-ranking diplomats available. Their mission: to make contact with a species that had turned its back on galactic society centuries ago, a species that might now be the only hope for survival against the Kale threat. Captain Tanaka stood in the Avenger's medical bay, watching as the ship's doctor treated Lieutenant Rodriguez's plasma burns. The younger officer had been manning one of the secondary weapons stations when a Kale-cutting beam breached the hull near his position. "You should have evacuated the sector when the breach alarm sounded," Tanaka said, his voice carrying no accusation, merely stating fact. Rodriguez winced as regenerative foam was applied to his wounded arm. "The point defense system was still operational, Captain. Another 30 seconds, and I could have." "You followed your instincts rather than protocols," Tanaka interrupted. "In this case, your instincts kept 3 Kale hunter-killers from reaching our propulsion section. But remember, Lieutenant, intuition must be balanced with discipline." "Yes, Captain," Rodriguez replied, his expression a mixture of pain and pride. Tanaka nodded once, then turned as Tactical Officer Sharma entered the medical bay. Her dark eyes held the intensity they always did after combat, a combination of adrenaline come-down and analytical focus. "We have a situation, Captain," she said without preamble. "Long-range sensors have detected a Union refugee convoy under Kale attack in the Deneb sector. 17 vessels, mostly civilian, carrying approximately 22,000 evacuees from the Rigel system." Tanaka's expression didn't change. "Our orders are to avoid detection and return to Bastion Outpost Delta 9 for refit and debriefing." "Yes, sir," Sharma acknowledged. "However, the refugee convoy's course will bring them directly through our current position in approximately 43 minutes. And our sensors indicate they're being pursued by the same Kale formation we engaged at Cygnus 7. Tanaka's eyes narrowed slightly. "They tracked our energy signature from the FTL jump." "It appears so, sir. They've deployed what appear to be specialized tracking constructs. They seem to be following us rather than continuing their assimilation of Cygnus 7. Captain Tanaka walked to the nearby viewport, staring out at the comet cluster that currently concealed their position. After a moment of silence, he spoke without turning. "Status of our max systems? Primary cannons at 83% charge. Barrels 1 and 2 fully operational. Barrel 3 at reduced efficiency. Point defense systems fully restored. And our FDL drive? Functional, but another emergency jump would risk catastrophic harmonic destabilization. Engineering recommends at least 12 hours of cooling before attempting another jump." Tanaka finally turned back to face his tactical officer. "So we have a choice. Maintain position and allow the Kale to detect and engage us when a refugee convoy passes through, likely resulting in significant civilian casualties. Or break cover, engage the Kale directly, and risk revealing more of our capabilities while potentially exposing the location of Bastion Delta 9 if we're tracked again. Those appear to be our options, yes, sir." Tanaka was silent for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Then he tapped his communications implant. "Bridge, this is the captain. Set condition 1 throughout the ship. All hands to battle stations. Prepare to execute combat maneuver sequence Theta 7 on my mark." As Tanaka strode from the medical bay toward the bridge, Sharma fell into step beside him. "Captain, should I prepare a mission parameters update for Aegis Command? This action would exceed our surveillance mandate." "No time," Tanaka replied. "We'll proceed under existing contingency protocols for imminent threat response. Send one communication only, encrypted channel. Omega-level threat confirmed. Request emergency intervention protocol authorization. Repeat, request emergency intervention." Meanwhile, the Union refugee convoy struggled to maintain formation as it fled through the Deneb sector. The civilian vessels, originally designed for comfortable passenger transport between core worlds, were dangerously overcrowded with evacuees from 3 different species. Their life support systems strained under the load, and fear spread through the ships like a contagion. On the bridge of the lead vessel, the Celestial Harmony, Captain Nerith of the Aquarian species fought to maintain order as her overwhelmed crew received another sensor update. "The crystalline formations are accelerating," reported her sensor officer, voice quavering. "Current trajectory analysis indicates intercept in 27 minutes. They'll overtake our slowest vessels first. Any response to our distress calls?" Nerith asked, already knowing the answer. "None, Captain. The nearest Union Defense Force vessel is 3 days away at maximum speed." Nerith closed her secondary eyelids in a gesture of resignation. The Union had been caught completely unprepared for the Kale threat, their military forces scattered and undermanned after centuries of reduced funding and low prioritization. "Divert emergency power to the rear vessel's engines," she ordered. "We stay together, or we don't survive at all." "Captain," the sensor officer suddenly exclaimed. "Multiple vessels approaching from the Barnard cluster. Configuration unknown, but they appear to be Union diplomatic ships." Hope surged through Nerith. "Open communications immediately." The view screen activated, showing a Thraxian diplomat whose translucent skin pulsed with obvious anxiety. "This is Ambassador Valzen of the Galactic Union Diplomatic Corps. We detected your convoy and came to render assistance." "Ambassador, we are grateful, but you must be aware we're being pursued by Kale." "Constructs," Nerith replied urgently. "Unless you have military escort." "We have no military vessels," Valzen interrupted, his voice strained. "We are on a diplomatic mission to locate another species, one that might help against the Kale. But we detected your convoy and hope to assist with evacuation." Nerith felt her hopes collapse. Diplomatic vessels with no weapons, no significant shields, no military escort, just more potential victims. Before she could respond, her sensor officer called out again, "Captain, the crystalline formations are changing course. They're accelerating toward the comet cluster." On the tactical display, Nerith watched in confusion as the pursuing Kale constructs suddenly veered away from the convoy, racing toward a seemingly empty region of space within the comet cluster. And then, emerging from the concealing dust and ice, a single vessel appeared, angular, battle-scarred, bristling with weapon systems that looked unlike anything Nerith had ever seen on a Union ship. That's the vessel from Cygnus 7, Ambassador Valzen whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and terror. "A human warship." The Avenger accelerated directly toward the oncoming Kale formations, broadcasting the same primal roar that had so disturbed the Union observers at Cygnus 7. Its Mac cannons fired in sequence, the massive projectiles tearing through the leading edge of the Kale pursuit force. But this time, the crystalline entities were prepared. They split into smaller formations, sacrificing some of their mass to absorb the kinetic impacts while the remainder continued forward. They had adapted their structure based on the previous encounter, creating denser, more impact-resistant crystalline configurations. The Avenger executed a series of evasive maneuvers, its point defense systems firing continuously as it drew the Kale away from the refugee convoy. But it was clear the human vessel was facing a more prepared enemy this time. On the bridge of the Celestial Harmony, Captain Nerith watched the battle with a mixture of hope and despair. "They're drawing the Kale away from us," she realized, "sacrificing themselves to buy us time." Ambassador Valzen stared at the tactical display, his diplomatic training temporarily forgotten in the face of such raw courage. Why would they do that? They don't even know us. The historical records indicate humans were aggressive, self-interested. "Perhaps," replied Nerith quietly, "your historical records were incomplete." The Avenger continued its desperate battle, sustaining increasing damage as the Kale formations pressed their attack. Several breaches were visible in its hull now, venting atmosphere into space. Its maneuvers became less precise as systems failed, but it continued to fight, drawing the Kale further from the civilian vessels with each passing minute. Captain Tanaka stood calmly on his bridge despite the chaos around him. Warning klaxons blared, damage reports flooded in, and the tactical display showed the Kale closing in from multiple vectors. "Max systems at critical levels," reported Sharma, her voice steady despite the dire situation. "Barrels 1 and 2 still operational, but reaching thermal tolerance limits. Point defense coverage down to 62%. Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7. Tanaka nodded once. "Continue evasive pattern. Maintain maximum distance between our position and the refugee convoy. Deploy remaining countermeasures." As the words left his mouth, a massive crystalline formation breached the Avenger's weakened shields, latching onto the starboard hull section. The ship shuddered as Kale matter began spreading across its surface, the assimilation process beginning. "Localized explosive decompression authorized," Tanaka ordered calmly. "Purge affected sections." Throughout the embattled ship, emergency bulkheads slammed shut as controlled explosions blew the affected hull sections and the crystalline growth into space. It was a desperate measure, sacrificing parts of a ship to save the whole. "Captain," communications officerly called out, "I'm receiving a coded transmission from the Union diplomatic vessels. They're requesting permission to assist, offering to extend their shields to—" Denied. Tanaka cut him off. "Maintain communications blackout protocols. Continue transmitting emergency intervention request on secure channel only." The Avenger shuddered again as another impact struck near the engineering section. Damage reports cascaded across every terminal. "Mac Barrel 2 has failed," Sharma reported. "Barrel 1 at critical tolerance. One more shot available before catastrophic failure." Tanaka's expression remained impassive. "Target the primary Kale coordination structure. Maximum yield. Fire when ready." The Avenger's remaining Mac cannon discharged its final round, the massive projectile streaking toward the central Kale formation. The impact was devastating, shattering the crystalline structure and sending fragments spinning in all directions. For a moment, the remaining Kale constructs seemed to falter, their movements becoming temporarily uncoordinated. "Full power to engines," Tanaka ordered. "Execute evasion pattern Omega. Buy us time." As the wounded ship struggled to pull away from the recovering Kale formations, sensor alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. "Multiple FDL signatures detected," called out the sensor officer. "Emergence points forming directly ahead." Tanaka's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication of his concern. Had the Kale developed faster-than-light capabilities already? Or had they somehow called reinforcements? Space rippled and tore as multiple jump points formed around the battlefield. But what emerged wasn't Kale reinforcements. Massive warships, easily 10 times the size of the Avenger, materialized in perfect formation. Their design shared the Avenger's angular, utilitarian aesthetic, but on a much larger scale and with clearly more advanced technology. Their hulls gleamed with the dull sheen of metastable alloys unknown to Union science, and their weapon systems hummed with barely contained energy. Each vessel bore the same insignia as the Avenger, a stylized planet with a shield and sword, but with additional markings identifying them as part of the Bastion defense fleet. Humans, whispered Ambassador Valzan from the bridge of his diplomatic vessel. Not just one ship, but an entire fleet. They never went extinct. They've been out there all along, watching, waiting. The lead human battleship immediately opened fire on the Kale formations. Unlike the Avengers' kinetic weapons, these ships deployed energy weapons of incredible power, focused beams that sliced through the crystalline structures with surgical precision. Smaller craft launched from carrier vessels, unmanned combat drones that swarmed the Kale constructs, targeting their weak points with unerring accuracy. The coordinated attack was like nothing the Union representatives had ever witnessed. Not a chaotic battle, but a precisely choreographed destruction. The human fleet didn't just fight. It hunted, methodically dismantling the Kale presence with ruthless efficiency. Within minutes, the space around the crippled Avenger was clear of Kale constructs. The human battleships formed a protective perimeter, while smaller medical and repair vessels approached the damaged destroyer. On every communication channel, on every frequency monitored by the Union vessels and the refugee convoy, a single message was broadcast in the clear, cold voice of authority. This is Admiral Helena Vega of the Human Bastion Defense Fleet. The Kale incursion in this sector has been neutralized. Avenger, stand by for emergency medical evacuation and engineering support. Union vessels, maintain your current position. You will not be harmed, but you will not interfere. Refugee convoy, you may proceed on your current course. We will provide escort until you reach safe harbor. There was a brief pause before the Admiral continued, her voice taking on an edge that sent chills through every Union representative listening. To the Galactic Union, we have monitored your response to the Kale threat. We find it insufficient. The assimilation of Cygnus 7 might have been prevented with decisive action. Instead, you debated while millions died. Humanity withdrew from your community centuries ago because you valued procedures over protection. We see that nothing has changed. The Kale represent an existential threat to all life in this galaxy. They cannot be negotiated with, appeased, or contained through diplomatic means. They can only be fought. Humanity has made its decision. We will engage the Kale with or without your cooperation. Your assistance would be welcomed, but it is not required. Union diplomatic vessels, you sought to find us. You have succeeded. Representatives will be transported to our command vessel in 1 standard hour to begin discussions regarding the current crisis. Be advised, we are not interested in rejoining your Union. We are interested only in survival, yours and ours. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence across every vessel in the vicinity. On the bridge of the Celestial Harmony, Captain Nerith turned to Ambassador Valzan, whose translucent skin had paled to an almost ghostly hue. "It seems," she said quietly, "that the ghosts of the past have returned, and they are not what we expected." Valzan could only nod, his multiple hearts racing with a mixture of fear and, surprisingly, hope. The humans, long dismissed as dangerously primitive and aggressive, had returned at the moment of the galaxy's greatest need. Whether they came as saviors or conquerors remained to be seen. As the massive human warships took up escort positions around the refugee convoy, their powerful engines guiding the civilian vessels towards safety, one thing became abundantly clear to everyone watching. The galaxy had changed forever. The Kale threat had awakened a sleeping giant, a species that had spent centuries preparing for war while the rest of civilization had forgotten how to fight. The true battle was just beginning. In the secure conference room aboard the human flagship Vigilant, Admiral Helena Vega faced the assembled Union diplomats across a stark metal table. Unlike the ornate chambers favored by Union representatives, human military vessels prioritized function over form, a philosophy evident in everything from their ship design to their uniforms. "Let me be absolutely clear," Vega stated, her steel-gray hair cut in a severe military style, her eyes showing the enhanced targeting implants common among human fleet commanders. "We did not reveal ourselves to save your refugee convoy, though I'm pleased we were able to do so. We came because the Avenger confirmed what our deep space monitoring has suspected for months. The Kale represent an extinction-level threat to all carbon-based life in this galaxy. Ambassador Valzen, still struggling to process the existence of such a massive human military presence, cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, on behalf of the Galactic Union, I extend our profound gratitude for your intervention. But I must ask, where have you been all this time? The historical records suggest humanity either destroyed itself or retreated to some isolated corner of space. A cold smile touched Vega's lips. The latter, Ambassador. When the Technovores began consuming our colony worlds 3 centuries ago, your Union refused military assistance, claiming our disproportionate defensive doctrines violated your weapons limitations treaties. You offered diplomatic solutions while our people were being devoured alive. She leaned forward slightly. So we made a choice. Rather than submit to your restrictions and ineffectual protection, we withdrew completely. We removed ourselves from your star charts, destroyed your navigation beacons to our territories, and retreated to what you call uncharted space. There we built our bastions, hidden star systems, shielded planets, concealed installations, where we could develop on our own terms. Without restrictions on your military technology, observed one of the other diplomats, a Centaurian with metallic skin. Without restrictions of any kind, Vega corrected. We built our society around a single principle. Never again would humanity face extinction because we were unprepared or undermanned. Every human child learns combat basics alongside mathematics. Every citizen serves at least 5 years in the defense forces. Every scientific breakthrough is evaluated first for its defensive applications. The diplomats exchanged uncomfortable glances. What you've created sounds like a militaristic regime, said a Procyon representative, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the harsh lighting of the conference room. Admiral Vega shook her head. What we've created is a civilization that refuses to be prey. We maintain art, culture, science, philosophy, all the hallmarks of advanced society. But we never forget that the universe is fundamentally hostile, and survival requires strength. She tapped a control panel, and a holographic display appeared above the table, showing the spread of Kale assimilation across a sector map. This is what we're facing. The Kale have already converted 17 worlds that we know of. Their expansion is accelerating exponentially with each successful assimilation. They are not a species as you understand it. They're a process, a fundamental rewriting of matter from carbon-based to silicon crystal formations. Ambassador Valzen studied the display with growing horror. The Union Council has only confirmed 7 affected worlds. How do you have this information? The Long Watch, Vega replied simply. For centuries, we've maintained a network of stealth observation vessels throughout Union space. The Avenger is one such ship, though typically they maintain strict non-intervention protocols. Another diplomat, a Threllan with chitinous mandibles, clicked in agitation. You've been spying on us all this time. We've been watching, corrected Director Harmon, who stood silently in the corner until now. The elderly intelligence officer stepped forward, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the lights. Monitoring threats, tracking political developments, assessing technological advancements. We never interfered until now. Admiral Vega nodded. The Kale represent a threat beyond our modeling parameters. Our projections indicate that without immediate, coordinated military response, they will convert approximately 60% of habitable worlds in this galaxy within 50 years. No species will be spared. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. What do you propose? Ambassador Valzen finally asked. Alliance, Vega replied. Immediately. Not Union membership. We have no interest in joining your political structures. A military alliance with clearly defined objectives. Containment, then eradication of the Kale. We provide the strategic direction and combat forces. You provide logistical support, access to your territories, and whatever military assets you can muster. That would require approval from the full Union Council, Valzen said hesitantly. There are procedures, votes required. By the time your council reaches a decision, 3 more worlds will have fallen. Director Harmon interrupted coldly. We've studied your decision-making processes extensively. They are inefficient. Admiral Vega held up a hand, silencing Harmon. We understand your political constraints, Ambassador. That's why we're offering a compromise. We will immediately deploy defensive forces to any world currently under Kale threat. This requires no formal alliance, simply non-interference from local authorities. Meanwhile, your council can debate the terms of a more permanent arrangement. She fixed each diplomat with an unwavering gaze. But understand this. With or without your permission, humanity has returned to the galactic stage. We will not stand by while the Kale convert world after world. The threat must be contained, and we are prepared to do whatever is necessary to ensure the survival of carbon-based life in this galaxy. As the human fleet escorted the refugee convoy to safety, a very different scene unfolded deep within Union space. On 100 worlds, the crystalline structures of the Kale continued their relentless expansion. But something had changed in their collective consciousness. A new priority had emerged. The first encounter with a human vessel had been anomalous, but the second encounter had revealed something far more significant. An organized, technologically advanced military force with both the capability and the will to destroy Kale structures. The threat assessment algorithms that guided the collective's decisions registered an unprecedented classification, existential competitor. Throughout Kale-controlled space, the conversion process subtly shifted. Resources previously allocated to simple expansion were redirected to the development of specialized defensive and offensive configurations. The beautiful, geometric spread of crystalline structures became more angular, more fortified. Deep beneath the converted surfaces of assimilated worlds, massive structures began to form. Crystalline computational arrays dedicated to analyzing the human threat and developing countermeasures. The Kale, for the first time in their existence, prepared for war. Aboard the Avenger, now docked within the massive repair bay of the Vigilant, Captain Tanaka stood at attention as Admiral Vega conducted a personal inspection of the damaged destroyer. Your actions at Cygnus 7 and in defense of the refugee convoy were exemplary, Captain, Vega said, examining a section of hull that had been nearly sheared away by a Kale cutting beam. Though technically, you exceeded your observational mandate. The situation required immediate intervention, Admiral, Tanaka replied evenly. The Kale threat classification warranted implementation of Emergency Protocol 7. Vega nodded, a hint of approval in her expression. Indeed it did. Your data on Kale composition and combat capabilities has proven invaluable. The Defense Council has unanimously approved full military engagement, based largely on your reports. She turned to face him directly. I'm designating the Avenger as our liaison vessel with Union forces. Once repairs are complete, you'll be assigned to coordinate joint operations with whatever military assets the Union manages to assemble. Tanaka's expression remained neutral, but his posture stiffened slightly. With respect, Admiral, the Avenger is a long-watch vessel. My crew is trained for covert observation, not diplomatic missions. And that's precisely why you're perfect for this assignment, Captain, Vega replied. You've seen the Kale up close. You've witnessed the Union's response, or lack thereof, and you've demonstrated the judgment necessary for independent command under extreme circumstances. She smiled thinly. Besides, after your rather dramatic introduction at Cygnus 7, you've become something of a legend among Union species. The ghost ship that fought the crystals they're calling you might as well capitalize on that reputation. 3 days later, the repaired Avenger led a small fleet of Union defense vessels toward the Procyon system, the latest target of Kale expansion. Though technically a joint operation, the disparity in capabilities was immediately apparent. The Union ships were largely retrofitted scientific or commercial vessels with hastily installed weapon systems, crewed by personnel with minimal combat training. On the Avenger's bridge, Tactical Officer Sharma watched the disorganized Union formation with thinly veiled skepticism. Their most powerful vessel has approximately 28% of our offensive capability, Captain, and their command structure appears problematic. Captain Tanaka, standing at his usual position with hands clasped behind his back, nodded once. They've lived in peace too long. They've forgotten the discipline required for war. He tapped his communication implant. Union vessels, this is Captain Tanaka of the Avenger. Tighten your formation according to the tactical patterns we transmitted. Maintain communications discipline. We are approaching Kale sensor range. The small fleet adjusted course, gradually assuming a more coherent formation as they neared the Procyon system. Initial scans showed Kale assimilation already underway on the third planet, a small mining colony with a population of approximately 8,000. Difference in Kale pattern detected, reported Sharma, studying her tactical display. The expansion geometry has changed. Previous encounters showed uniform outward progression, but this formation shows reinforced nodes at regular intervals, almost like fortifications. Tanaka's eyes narrowed slightly. They're adapting, learning from previous engagements. He turned to communications officerly. Transmit to all vessels. Prepare for immediate engagement. Primary targets are the reinforced nodes in the Kale formation. Secondary targets are the connecting structures between nodes. Launch unmanned scout drones for close sensor sweep. As the small fleet approached the partially assimilated mining colony, the difference in Kale behavior became starkly apparent. Rather than continuing their methodical expansion across the planet's surface, the crystalline structures had formed a defensive perimeter around their primary assimilation center. And as the human and Union vessels entered orbit, the Kale responded with immediate aggression. Dozens of crystalline formations detached from the larger structure, propelling themselves toward the approaching fleet. Unlike the hunter-killer formations encountered previously, these constructs were larger, more heavily armored, and equipped with what appeared to be specialized weapon formations. Energy buildup detected in the approaching Kale constructs, Sharma reported tensely. Pattern consistent with directed energy weapons. They've developed ranged weapons, Tanaka observed calmly. Inform all vessels. Evasive pattern delta. Deploy countermeasures. The Avenger accelerated ahead of the Union ships, its more advanced propulsion and maneuvering systems allowing it to engage the Kale constructs first. Its MAC cannons fired in precise sequence, targeting the leading edge of the Kale formation. But this time, the crystalline entities had prepared. They split apart moments before impact, allowing the kinetic projectiles to pass between them with minimal damage. The Kale constructs returned fire, unleashing beams of coherent energy that struck the Avenger's shields with tremendous force. The human vessel shuddered under the impact, but maintained course. They've replicated directed energy weapon technology, Sharma noted with professional detachment, likely adapted from studying Union weapon signatures. Captain Tanaka nodded. Adjust targeting parameters. Switch to multi-spectrum point defense. Deploy disruptor drones. The battle quickly evolved into a complex dance of attack and counterattack. The Avenger led the engagement, using its superior maneuverability and tactical systems to draw Kale fire, while the Union vessels targeted exposed sections of the crystalline formations. But it soon became clear that this would not be the quick, decisive victory humanity had hoped for. The Kale were learning, adapting with unprecedented speed. Each time a human tactic proved effective, the crystalline entities would adjust their formation or defense parameters to minimize damage from subsequent attacks. On the Vigilant, now serving as the command center for humanity's war against the Kale, Admiral Vega watched tactical feeds from the Procyon engagement with growing concern. Their adaptation rate exceeds our models, observed Tactical Director Washington. They're incorporating elements of our own technology against us. Dr. Reeves, the xenobiologist, nodded grimly. It's not just mimicry. They're analyzing the fundamental principles of our weapons and developing countermeasures based on physical laws. Their collective intelligence is impressive. Admiral Vega's expression remained impassive, but her enhanced eyes narrowed slightly. Impressive or not, they can be destroyed. The question is whether we can destroy them faster than they can adapt. She turned to Director Harmon. What's the status of Project Sunforge? The intelligence director checked his secure terminal. The prototypes are ready for field testing. Dr. Maxwell believes the quantum resonance disruption will be effective against the crystalline matrix, but we need direct engagement data to confirm. Then it's time, Vega decided. Deploy the resonator prototypes to Captain Tanaka. If they prove effective, we'll begin immediate mass production. As the battle at Procyon continued, the Union diplomat Valzen addressed an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate representatives from over 200 species, hummed with tension and fear. The humans call it an existential war, Valzen explained, his translucent skin pulsing with stress. They believe, and their evidence is compelling, that the Kale intend to convert all carbon-based life in the galaxy to their crystalline form. High Counselor Jun, a Vordonian whose species had already lost 2 colony worlds to Kale assimilation, leaned forward. And these humans, a species we dismissed centuries ago as too primitive and aggressive, now possess military technology that outclasses our own. Significantly, Valzen confirmed. Their isolation forced them to develop along different technological paths. While we focused on energy efficiency, environmental integration, and non-invasive technologies, they pursued military applications, hardened systems, and redundant infrastructures. They built their entire civilization around the concept of survival at any cost. Are they proposing alliance or conquest? Asked another counselor, suspicion evident in her tone. Valzen hesitated. They propose a military alliance only, not political integration. They have no interest in joining the Union or submitting to our governance. They offer protection in exchange for access, resources, and cooperation. And if we refuse? The question came from a representative of the Mechanoid Collective, one of the few non-carbon-based member species of the Union. They were unclear on that point, Valzen admitted, but it was strongly implied that they would take whatever actions they deemed necessary to combat the Kale threat, with or without our permission. The council chamber erupted into heated debate. Some representatives argued for immediate alliance with the humans, citing the desperate need for protection against the Kale. Others expressed fear that exchanging one threat for another would merely delay the inevitable. That once the Kale were defeated, humanity might turn its formidable military capabilities against the Union itself. As the political deliberations continued, the war itself intensified. The engagement at Procyon had ended in a Pyrrhic victory. The Kale presence was destroyed, but at the cost of severe damage to the Avenger and the loss of 3 Union vessels. More concerning was the confirmation that the Kale were rapidly developing both defensive and offensive capabilities specifically tailored to counter human tactics. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Human forces, now operating openly throughout Union space, engaged Kale assimilation structures wherever they were detected. Initial victories came at acceptable costs, but with each engagement, the Kale adapted, making subsequent battles increasingly difficult and costly. The deployment of the quantum resonance disruptors, devices that targeted the fundamental binding frequencies of the Kale crystalline matrix, provided a temporary advantage. But within days, the Kale had developed specialized dampening structures that reduced the weapon's effectiveness. It was becoming a race between human ingenuity and Kale adaptability, a race with the survival of carbon-based life hanging in the balance. 6 months into the war, Captain Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Avenger, surveying the tactical display with grim determination. His ship, having survived dozens of engagements, bore little resemblance to the vessel that had first engaged the Kale at Cygnus 7. Its hull was a patchwork of repairs and modifications, its weapon systems upgraded multiple times to counter the latest Kale adaptations. The crew, too, had changed. Gone was the cool professional detachment that had characterized their early operations. In its place was a hardened resolve born from months of continuous combat. They had witnessed the horror of worlds half-converted, seen the crystalline formations absorb and restructure everything from buildings to people, fought against an enemy that learned from every encounter. Status report. Tanaka ordered, his voice showing no sign of the exhaustion that shadowed his eyes. "All systems operational, Captain," replied Sharma, now serving as executive officer following the death of the previous XO in an engagement 3 weeks prior. The new phased array disruptors are showing promising results in simulations. Engineering reports the shield modifications are complete. Tanaka nodded. "And our Union escort?" "The Valiant Defender and Stellar Guardian are maintaining formation. Their crews have shown significant improvement in combat operations. I would rate them at approximately 65% of Bastion standard efficiency, a notable increase from our initial joint operations." It was high praise coming from Sharma, and Tanaka acknowledged it with a slight nod. The Union forces, while still technologically outmatched by both human and Kale capabilities, had proven surprisingly adaptable. Necessity had forced them to embrace combat doctrines and tactical thinking that had been foreign to their peaceful society for generations. New orders from Admiral Vega, reported communications, Officer Lee, were being redirected to the Arcturus system. Long-range sensors have detected unusual Kale activity there. "Unusual how?" Tanaka asked, immediately alert. Lee studied his console. The report indicates a significant concentration of Kale structures, but with minimal planetary assimilation. They appear to be building something. The Avenger and its Union escorts arrived at the Arcturus system 26 hours later, approaching with maximum stealth protocols engaged. What they discovered confirmed humanity's worst fears. In orbit around the system's 5th planet, a gas giant with 16 moons, the Kale had constructed a massive structure unlike anything previously encountered. It resembled a vast, crystalline web, spanning thousands of kilometers, with a central formation that pulsed with energy. "Analysis?" Tanaka demanded, studying the structure on the main view screen. Science Officer Patel, a recent transfer from the research vessel Prometheus, examined her readings with growing concern. "The energy signature is consistent with an artificial space-time distortion, Captain, similar to our FTL drive technology, but on a much larger scale." "They're building a jump gate," Tanaka concluded, his voice flat. "A means of transporting their structures across interstellar distances instantly, without requiring conventional ships. If they complete this technology and replicate it," Sharma observed, "they could spread their assimilation wave across the galaxy in a matter of months rather than decades." Tanaka tapped his communication implant. "Tanaka to Vigilant. Priority Alpha transmission for Admiral Vega. The Kale have developed large-scale FTL transportation technology. Request immediate reinforcement for strike operation." The response was immediate. "Strike force en route. Hold position and continue observation. Do not engage unless detected. Vega out." For 48 tense hours, the Avenger and its escorts maintained position at the edge of the Arcturus system, monitoring the continued construction of the Kale jump gate. Tanaka used the time to plan a coordinated attack with the commanders of the Union vessels, a testament to how far their joint operations had progressed since the early, chaotic days of the war. When the human reinforcements arrived, they came in overwhelming force. 15 Bastion warships, including the massive dreadnought Indomitable, emerged from FDL on the system's outer edge. With them came specialized vessels carrying a weapon that had been developed in secret by human scientists, the Quantum Cascade Disruptor, designed specifically to create a chain reaction in the Kale crystalline matrix. Admiral Vega herself commanded the operation from the bridge of the Indomitable. "All vessels, assume attack formation," she ordered. "Primary target is the central node of the jump gate structure. Secondary targets are the support structures and any Kale defensive formations. Captain Tanaka, your Avenger will lead the Union contingent on the southern approach vector." The battle that followed was unlike any previous engagement in the war. The Kale, apparently aware of the existential threat to their new technology, responded with unprecedented coordination and aggression. Thousands of crystalline constructs swarmed from the partially completed jump gate, forming intricate defensive patterns that adapted in real time to the human attack strategies. For hours, the space around the gas giant became a maelstrom of destruction. Human warships unleashed their full arsenal: kinetic weapons, energy beams, quantum disruptors, and swarms of autonomous combat drones. The Kale countered with their own weapons, many mimicking human and Union technology, but with distinctive crystalline modifications. On the bridge of the Avenger, Captain Tanaka directed his vessel through the chaos with the same calm precision that had characterized his command from the beginning. Despite heavy damage to several systems, the destroyer carved a path through the Kale defenses, providing an opening for the Union vessels to target vulnerable sections of the jump gate structure. QCD deployment vessels in position, reported Sharma, monitoring the overall battle strategy, preparing for a primary weapon release. The Quantum Cascade Disruptor, humanity's latest technological response to the Kale threat, represented a significant escalation in destructive potential. Rather than simply damaging the crystalline structures, it was designed to trigger a cascading failure in the molecular bonds that formed the basis of Kale existence. As the specialized vessels moved into position, the Kale response intensified. It was as if the collective consciousness recognized the existential threat and diverted all resources to preventing its deployment. Defensive Pattern Omega. Tanaka ordered as a swarm of Kale constructs broke through the human formation, heading directly for the QCD vessels. All power to forward shields and point defense. We need to buy them time. The Avenger accelerated directly into the path of the oncoming Kale swarm, its weapons firing continuously. The Union vessels, following Tanaka's lead, formed a defensive perimeter around the vulnerable QCD deployment ships. From the Indomitable, Admiral Vega watched the tactical display with grim determination. All ships, concentrate fire on Sector 7. Create a corridor for the QCD deployment. For several critical minutes, the battle hung in the balance. The Avenger sustained heavy damage, with multiple hull breaches and systems failures. Two of the Union vessels were completely destroyed, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect the QCD ships. But finally, a gap appeared in the Kale defenses, a momentary weakness created by the coordinated human and Union attack. QCD ships proceed to deployment coordinates immediately, Vega ordered. All covering vessels, maintain suppression fire. The specialized vessels moved into position at key points around the Kale jump gate structure. Each deployed a single probe that accelerated toward the crystalline formation. QCD activation in 15 seconds, announced Tactical Director Washington from the Indomitable's bridge. All vessels prepare for immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. As the human and Union fleets executed a coordinated retreat maneuver, the QCD probes reached their designated positions. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a wave of energy unlike anything previously observed rippled through the Kale structure. Where the wave passed, the crystalline formations didn't simply break apart. They disintegrated at the molecular level, the complex bonds that held them together unraveling in a cascade of quantum instability. The effect spread rapidly through the jump gate structure, each section of crystalline matter amplifying the cascading effect as it disintegrated. Within minutes, the massive Kale construction, the work of months of concentrated effort, dissolved into a cloud of inert particles. QCD effect exceeding projected parameters, reported Washington, unable to keep a note of satisfaction from his voice. Cascade reaction at 130% of predicted efficiency. The Kale structure has been completely neutralized. A cheer erupted across the communications channels as human and Union crews witnessed the first decisive victory since the war began. But on the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Vega's expression remained somber. Complete sensor sweep of the system, she ordered. Confirm no active Kale presence remaining. The celebration proved short-lived. Even as the combined fleet conducted mop-up operations in the Arcturus system, reports arrived of increased Kale activity in a dozen other sectors. The destruction of the jump gate had been a significant victory, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath of the battle, the Union Council finally came to a formal decision. Faced with irrefutable evidence of both the Kale threat and humanity's effectiveness in combating it, they voted to enter into a formal military alliance. The Galactic Defense Compact was established, integrating Union resources and territory access with human military leadership and technology. For the species of the Galactic Union, it was a profound cultural shift, an acknowledgement that centuries of peace had left them vulnerable, and that the aggressive, militaristic humans they had once shunned might be their only hope for survival. For humanity, the alliance represented both opportunity and risk. While it provided access to resources and territories needed to effectively combat the Kale, it also meant revealing more about their bastion locations and technological capabilities than many were comfortable with. The war entered a new phase, less desperate, more methodical. With the QCD technology providing a crucial advantage, human-led forces began systematically targeting Kale assimilation centers across Union space. The crystalline entities continued to adapt and evolve, but for the first time, the tide seemed to be turning. 6 months after the Battle of Arcturus, Captain Tanaka stood in the observation lounge of the Avenger, watching as the agricultural world of Cygnus 7 slowly recovered from its partial assimilation. Where crystalline structures had once dominated the landscape, new vegetation was beginning to grow. Union terraforming ships orbited the planet, accelerating the restoration process. Tactical Officer Sharma, now permanently promoted to Executive Officer, joined him at the viewport. "Hard to believe this is where it all began," she remarked. "One ship against an unknown enemy." Tanaka nodded slightly. "The beginning of a new era for both humanity and the Union." "Do you think we'll ever fully eradicate the Kale?" Sharma asked, her voice carrying a rare note of uncertainty. Tanaka considered the question carefully before answering. "Perhaps not. They adapt too quickly, learn too efficiently. But we can contain them, limit their expansion, develop countermeasures to each new threat they present." He turned to face his XO directly. "The war has changed us all. Humanity emerged from isolation. The Union embraced the necessity of military strength, and even the Kale have been forced to evolve beyond their simple assimilation patterns. And when the war ends, what then?" Tanaka's expression remained impassive, but his eyes conveyed a depth of thought that had made him one of humanity's most respected commanders. "Then we face the greatest challenge of all, learning to coexist. Humanity cannot return to isolation, nor can the Union return to complacency. We have all been forged by this conflict into something new." As the Avenger prepared to depart for its next assignment, escorting a joint human-Union scientific mission to study a contained Kale fragment, Captain Tanaka reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. A routine long-watch patrol had become the catalyst for galactic transformation. The silent scourge of the Kale had forced both humanity and the Union to confront their own weaknesses and find strength in unlikely alliance. The ghost that had appeared on Union scanners had proven to be neither savior nor conqueror, but something more complex, a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths and unexpected possibilities. As humanity and the Union species slowly learned to work together, a future neither would have imagined began to take shape, one forged in the crucible of existential threat. The war continued, but so did hope. And in the quiet moments between battles, both humans and their former adversaries discovered that survival often depends not just on strength, but on the willingness to change.